I do. Oh, this is horrific. I have never done this before. Oh, so
I regret this.
I regret this greatly. I don't know why Jay put us up to this, but why don't you do a quick introduction? What is happening right now with Futarchy and
Okay, so Prophet's here. So Prophet's here this week. He's gonna be here with us in Singapore until we get governance done, Futarchy done. Yeah. And
How's your brain working right now? On a scale of 1 to 10, how is it? 10 being absolutely horrific.
I hate Jay. Put this up.
So Jay is sitting right behind his camera, for those of you that don't know, and he's just smiling right now, and he's taking videos. But, okay.
Yeah, so we thought when we do video, it's not too bad. I think this could be.
I am done. I'm done. So we just came back from the ice bath. Let's go straight into some rapid fire questions, and then maybe we just go FP Profit, and then we just keep going to the next one. So, what's one word you'd use to describe yourself in this moment?
Cold.
Hot.
Okay. Would you rather fight one FP-sized polar bear or 100 polar bear-sized FPs? Come on.
100 polar bear-sized FPs.
One FP-sized polar bear. I feel like that's a no-brainer.
Win the lottery or find true love?
Find true love.
Find true love.
Oh. Given we didn't actually introduce ourselves because my brain wasn't working, Prophet, would you like to start with a quick introduction about maybe yourself and what MetaDAO does just for the audience?
Sure, yeah. I'm Prophet, and I work on MetaDAO, which does markets for decision-making.
Okay. FP?
Yeah, I'm FP with Sanctum. We build liquid staking for Solana.
And for you that don't know me, I am Nick. I lead Superteam Singapore. Let's kind of dive into the questions, I guess. Biggest challenge you both have had in your careers?
I think biggest challenge was the TG for sure. Like that took a lot out of all of us. Like we were basically working, like 18-hour days or 20-hour days, 7 days a week for 2 months nonstop. And everybody tells you can't make everybody happy, but I always want to make everyone happy, right? And so like having it, people not being happy was very difficult for me. I think that it was very lucky. I was very lucky that in my time of being sort of very crushed about this whole thing, I had like an awesome people like you, right? People like Xian and Raj and people that I called who were able to support me. Yeah, and that was a very, very trying time. Yeah.
I can imagine. Prophet?
Yeah, I would say, so before I was Prophet, I worked in Web 2 as a software engineer, and something that frustrated me and was a challenge was dealing with bad decision making, which I guess is kind of what brings me here. But like, I think it was challenging because you're taught in school that firms are rational and they optimize for shareholder value. And then you work in a large organization and it looks more like a political system than it looks like that. And yeah, I would say like dealing with that was like a challenge.
Was there a moment that kind of defined your career to where you are now?
Sure. I would just say like, I actually don't think that there was one day where I woke up and I was like, okay, decision making is bad, markets are better, so let's do this instead. It was just it was first a gradual process of seeing decisions being made for the wrong reasons, and then coming across this YouTube video where Robin Hanson explains this radical system where you can have markets make decisions. And I was immediately like, holy shit, this is going to change the world. And so I guess if any, maybe that day, like, which I don't really remember the day other than watching the YouTube video, but yeah.
I was going to ask, what did you search that led down this rabbit hole of suddenly finding, because Futarchy is not something you would just kind of Google, right? Like off the top of it.
Yeah, I mean, ETH people actually were into Futarchy a while ago. like Vitalik had a blog post about it back in 2015. And yeah, I think I went down some rabbit hole of ETH presentations, and yeah, I came across it.
And FB, how did you come across Futarchy in the first? Like, how did you hear about it? How did you kind of get involved and get interested?
I actually also have been following Robin Hanson for actually quite long. So it was actually this. So my interest in Futarchy predates, MetaDAO. Yeah, I think in general, I think like governance is broken most of the time. And I think I don't know if, Futarchy has its flaws and it's not perfect, and we will be talking about many of its potential failure cases. But I think it's the only kind of governance system that I think has a chance of actually working in crypto. I think given that crypto is markets on steroids, we should expect it to work especially well. Yeah.
And same question then, so you heard about Futarchy way before. What got you into that concept? Were you studying I remember you were studying economics at one point. Was that because of that or something else?
Yeah, I think just broadly potentially talk about the ETH people as well. I think there are sort of overlaps between sort of economists and the DeFi guys on ETH. Yeah, I think I'm not sure. There wasn't this eureka moment either, but it was always kind of floating around in my head, right? Thinking about oh, this is an interesting way in which to do governance. But the way in which I was introduced to it wasn't so much the token side, but rather in oh, this is a potential alternative to actual sort of legislative democracy, stuff like that.
And then I realized that we probably will have to cut this, but I realized that we haven't gone through high level Futarchy. I don't know, Profit probably makes sense for you to explain high level. What is it? How does it work? Can you explain the concept?
Sure, yeah. So the high level idea is let the market make the decision. So an example that I've been using recently to explain a very high level example is imagine Alice and Bob are deciding what to get, where to get food. And Bob is like, Alice, I think we're going to like pizza. And Alice is like, I'm not sure. And Bob is like, okay, I'll bet you $10 that if we go get pizza, you will enjoy it. And so in a sense, that's actually a very primitive Futarchy. There's the bet or kind of this market that's deciding whether or not they should go get pizza. And it turns out that you can apply this to any decision using any metric. So what exists today is token-based Futarchy mostly, where people can bet on how an action will affect the value of a token. So Jupiary, for example, could have been decided by having a decision market or a Futarchic market on what will be the price of Jupe if we go through with Jupiary, what will be the price of Jupe if you don't, and then just doing whatever the market says is better for Jupiter.
How does this apply to Sanctum? I don't know, are we allowed to say this yet, but how is Futarchy going to play within kind of cloud and the ecosystem?
I think in general it comes down to why have a token and why have governance, right? These are sort of the critical reasons that we must answer, and we must answer them sort of honestly and earnestly. I think, right, we are here in the DeFi space, right? We are here in crypto, and I think we have to believe in some sort of governance, right? That's why we have a token in the first place. The idea is to put these financial primitives or crypto economic primitives and available to everyone, right? And also accessible to everyone, not just on the product side, but also on the people actually make decisions about what the protocol does. What we're doing is too big, to be put in the hands of a few key people. So that is broadly speaking why we want to do governance, and why we have a token in the first place. And as to why Futarchy, right, or how Futarchy will interact, I think I have been thinking about this for a long time, which is that I've seen sort of governance again and again kind of just not perform very well. And I think there are a couple of failure cases. The first is, I would say, rubber stamping, right, in which it's not real governance, right? It's the team,
Theater.
yeah, it's governance theater, right? So the core team decides on like what they actually want to do, right? They put it up to the vote, and the vote goes how they want it to go, right? And that's, I mean, to me, this is like theater, and I don't believe in theater. I believe in like real stuff. So that's like one sort of failure case. I think the other failure case is kind of like token voting, and this is maybe people coming in with the best of intentions, but often, it gets hijacked or and there's multiple ways for it just to fail. Either it gets hijacked, right, like some sort of governance attack, or like just people like kind of like don't care, right? And so like what I think is that in order for us to kind of like really decentralize the protocol, we have to make sure that in the long term, the protocol is able to autonomously make decisions that are better than what the core team could make on its own. And this is like very ambitious goal, right? But I think that's where we need to get to, right? So yeah, so I think like that is why it took us so long to think about it, right? And I think like at the end of the day, right? I think Futarchy is the kind of like the most like the most plausible option, right? That we can get to that promised land. Yeah.
Just to touch on that then, Prophet, like, did you look at in your kind of discovery or your journey to Futarchy, were there other kind of models of governance you looked at that were potentially interesting? Like, what made you come to the final decision, like, this is the way to go?
Yeah, I mean, it really was like once I found Futarchy, I kind of fell in love with Futarchy. But I also did look at the other systems that people had talked about. So like, there's conviction-weighted voting, which has existed for a while. It's been implemented at somewhat large scale. I think Polkadot governance had conviction-weighted voting. There were like early experiments like OneHive on Ethereum that had other special purpose voting. There was even something called holacracy, which was a weird idea that people talked about. And yeah, I mean, when I looked at all of them, they didn't really make sense. And I think a lot of the things that they're tilting at are actually like what Futarchy is. So Futarchy is kind of like voting, but it's conviction weighted in that like you can put more money at stake, and you reward the people who are right, and you take away you have to put something at stake, and you're slashed if you're wrong. So like if you want to think about Futarchy like that, that's just kind of how it is. That's just like what a market is in the first place. And you want to do those all for like various reasons, like making sure that the experts are the ones actually making decisions as opposed to just anyone, and making sure that people are incentivized to show up. Oh yeah, and that's the other thing the markets provide is they provide an incentive to show up because you can make money. And so yeah, I think like this is kind of what all these governance systems have tilted at, but never actually completely done until Futarchy. Futarchy kind of unifies them all.
What's the biggest misconception about Futarchy that if you wanted to clear up?
Yeah, that it's too complicated. I think a lot of people who have not traded in Futarchy think that it's complicated, but once you trade in your first market, you'll actually see that it is like, I mean, yes, it takes some time for your brain to get used to, just as I imagine voting may have taken some time to get used to in a time when there was only kings and things done by decree. But at a conceptual level, it's actually somewhat simple. I mean, yeah, like the Alice and Bob example, that's an example of a Futarchy. So yeah, I would say that's a misconception.
So you're both quite public figures. With, I guess, FP, you write a lot of essays. Prophet, you've been on a lot of talks and whatnot. What's something that the audience would not know about you? And something interesting. Maybe we start with FP?
Don't put me on the spot like that. So something
people probably don't know about you.
Okay.
And something interesting.
I really like being me. Can we say that?
Sure. In what context?
So it's not like a sex thing, right? I don't enjoy sort of like flashing people, but I do not like wearing clothes, and I will try to wear as little as possible where I can. So if I'm alone in the apartment, there are no clothes.
Okay.
Yeah.
That's fun.
Yeah.
Prophet?
I mean, I guess because I'm a non, there's probably a lot that people don't know about me.
I promise I'm not digging.
Yeah, I'm just trying to think of something interesting. I don't know. I would say actually one benefit of being an anon is probably people assume that I'm more interesting or like mysterious than I am. Maybe that is the interesting thing. That like, if you knew me, you know that I'm actually like a pretty boring person. Like I pretty much do the same thing every day, which is I wake up, I brush my teeth, I go to the office, and then I like code or respond to Discord or tweet, and then I go home and I like read a little bit and take a shower, and then I go to bed, and I like do that every day. And I don't really have any hobbies. So yeah, I would say maybe that's the interesting thing is that I'm not very like interesting behind the mask.
Let's do another rapid fire at a slightly different topic. Overrated and underrated, and why? Okay, so let's start FP and then we'll go profit again. Bold founders, overrated or underrated?
Overrated, not because I think they're bad, but just because they seem to make it like very big about them. Like it's very important that they are bold for some reason. Yeah.
I think underrated. I think it's like very difficult to be actually unique and to do something hard. And that should be celebrated because it brings a lot of values. It brings a lot of value to the rest of us.
MEV, underrated or overrated?
No comment.
Overrated. I think all MEV is going to zero. And yeah, if your value accrual, if your like native token of a blockchain, like if your model of Sol is based on MEV, I think that's a very faulty model and is vastly going to overstate how much money you're going to be able to make. And I think the reason for that is ultimately when you think about MEV, there's no such thing as healthy MEV. There's only taking money from people. Even in the case of like a liquidation, you're still taking wealth from the people who are being liquidated. And the key thing to understand is that that person always has the incentive to not get MEV'd. So like the person sending their swap doesn't want to get sandwiched. The person borrowing doesn't want to pay a high liquidation fee. And so they have monopoly over their own flow. So like as a swapper, I can always just send my transaction to a validator who isn't going to MEV me, isn't going to sandwich me. And as like a borrower, I can always just go to a platform that, I mean, yeah, I guess there's like the Euler model of auctioning off the liquidation so that really all of it gets distributed back to the users in the protocol. So I think MEV is going to zero. It's overrated.
Doxxing, underrated or overrated?
I overrated because I think in the past kind of like people like kind of didn't want to dox because they didn't want to rug, but I think there are very sort of good reasons to want to be anonymous. So
I actually think underrated. I think like, yeah, today the systems are not in place such that we can reasonably trust anon founders. And so like, I think Futarchy is the solution to this, but in today's world where projects exist as they are, I think doxing is actually helpful as like a reputational.
Icepots, overrated or underrated?
underrated. I had a good time.
I think overrated. Yeah, I think it's just like such a low order bit compared to things like sleep and eating well.
Overrated is so cold. All right, let's call it a wrap. Thank you guys.